I take primary responsibility. It was me who, from years back, I decided that our best hope is to bring Opidios to power as a transitional step.
Hello, viewers. Many of you know me as the former editor-in-chief and founder of Addis Standard Trilingual magazine and online publication. I am sitting here today not in that capacity, but to take an opportunity of interviewing Jawar Mohammed, a man who doesn't need an introduction, as many of you know. And I'm seizing on the opportunity of having a conversation with him, not as such an interview, about a book that he is just about to launch. So by a stroke of luck, I happen to be in the same location where he is now in Nairobi, and I reached out asking him if he could sit down and have this conversation with me. Our conversation will focus on the substances and some of the things that struck me when I was reading the book. And I would like to ask him and have that conversation with him, because most of the things he's raising in the book were things that when I was in the newsroom, we have been reporting about. So we go back and forth in that conversation. Having said that, I like to say welcome to the interview. And this is the first time I'm sitting with you, Jawar. And thank you, after a lot of back and forth, for having the time to sit with me here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. As I was saying earlier, this conversation begins with a book that he just, a memoir he authored and is preparing to launch, and also having a book tour, I understand. I want to start from when I was starting to read the book. I could not help but appreciate the photographic memory that you displayed in the part one of this book, when you were talking about your childhood, growing up in an area where I also identify by name, not far from where I was born and raised. But you go in details about telling the names of the rivers and the trees and the people and the stories that you were listening to. I wanted to say, is this something that you wanted to pursue further, not just as an introduction part of this book, this memoir, or you wanted to revisit that? Because I think it could be a historical record if you could maintain that kind of a vivid memory of narrating your childhood and what the social fabric of the area you grew up looked like. How did you manage to retain so much memory of your childhood after so many that happened in your life?
I used to be smart. When writing the book, and I wrote it in prison, I decided to dedicate a significant portion of the book to my childhood, because often those of us in politics, we often neglect the impact of our childhood, our lived experience on our political outlook during, in the later life or part of our life. The socio-economic political situation when during our formative age really has significant impact on the ideas and the views, the associations, affiliations you create once you move towards adulthood. And looking back, this book is about looking back. Of course, I sharpened my political thoughts in schools and in activism. But in prison, sitting and reflecting, I couldn't escape the fact that I was bitten with the political poison when I was a kid. And I wanted to see what made me. I organized my first rally, probably I was 12 or 13. Right? And this drive I have to challenge injustice, to challenge the status quo, it was there when I was a child. So I said, you know what? I am more of a product of my childhood than Stanford, Columbia, or Oxford. Often people, would describe me. They attribute my political skills to my Ivy League schools. They might have sharpened it, but I think the area I grew up, where OLF was very active. EPRDF, TPLF just came in the conflict, the contestations. I narrate a story where the early soldiers that influenced me.
I don't want to give too much of it. I want people to read it.
Yeah.
And this is not a review of the book. This is not a critic of the book. This is just a conversation of some of the things that struck me when I was reading the book. And I want people to get a hold of it and read it if possible. I wonder, because going forward, and this is after your trip abroad, after so much of agitation as a childhood that you did, you went on organizing. This is something that I don't know about. So the Oromo Youth Leadership Conference, and one of the things that captured me is the way you started with a small group of young Oromo students abroad, and then it grew up into becoming a larger convention that involves a lot of people that you talk about that. And I wonder whether that was the seed when during the Oromo protest, whether you used any of those experiences to be able to see the Gero movement, for example, of 2014 and 2018, because this is as early as March 2006, the establishment of the Oromo Youth Leadership Conference. And some of the discussions that you had there indicate towards the collective mobilization of the youth. Did it help you in any way when the protests started to erupt in Oromia in 2014? Because it was, I think, were they related?
Definitely, they are part of a plan. They were not a fluke. We didn't lead a mob as people assume. One way I significantly dedicated to this is people forget my early activities, what we did. The idea of the youth leadership conference emanates from my time in Singapore. When I was in Singapore, I was fortunate enough to attend youth leadership conferences in Canada, in Netherlands, in Sri Lanka, where young men and women of my age from different walks of life, different country, different culture, different religion, come together and create interpersonal bond as well as discuss contemporary political and social affairs with the aim of breaking boundaries, with the aim of managing diversity towards a better future.
Diversity. When you say diversity, because this is one of the points that I wanted to ask you. Part of the training that you give to this group that grew larger as time goes by is managing diversity and I assume tolerance with other national group and how even to tolerate one another. And fast forward 2024, and I look at the current formation of the youth or even the political activities that are among the Oromo youth, and I look at the polarization between different national groups there, and I believe, you can correct me, I believe that it was the undoing of whatever happened in that structure that you created within the Oromo Youth Leaders Association. So, do you regret? Do you see that has unraveled 10 years down the line in the political dispensation we have now?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't unravel. You see, something you plant seed. The tree grows. Some of the branches might dry. Some of them may fall out. But as long as the stem is there, the tree will be there. Even if you cut down the tree, there will be new brushes coming up. So I don't think it has been reversed. Look, the genesis of it, when I was in Singapore, that's the first time I saw the Oromo diaspora. And this is a time when our leadership was in exile. This is the first time I actually joined the internet, and I was seeing the debates among our political leadership, big names we grew up aspiring to. And I went to USA with two ideas. A, go in left, reform it, strengthen it. B, find alternative means. For both of these objectives, I found the civic society to establishing or strengthening civic society to be crucial. So I wanted to start with the youth, and I reached out to the youth, and we provided this leadership. Of course, I brought trainers from my previous experience, and we trained a small core of group. Then we expanded. There's no reverse. The reason I tell you there's no reverse is because most of the people you see in diaspora today who are playing significant role in leading our community product of that process, and also that helping me refine how to organize people, because diversity is very important. Every society, there is no homogeneous society in the world. One group could be, a country could be made up of same people speaking the same language, then we'll have religion. You could have a country with the same religion, then you could have ethnicity or tribal, or even if it is the same ethnicity and same religion, then you have island and lowland situation. So this is natural. You can't really go against nature. You cannot eradicate diversity. You cannot eliminate it. Trying to eliminate the diversity is actually what creates conflict. So best you can do is manage diversity so that you can mobilize people, you can engage in collective action towards collective emancipation of a group you are fighting for. So that period was very important for me, and those people, they were not just dropped; they remained integral and active part of the social movement we later launched and pushed. People like Mohammed Arfasi, Dr. these people continue till now. So that's why do we have a little bit of fragmentation now? Yeah, because of the political process. It goes for cycle.
I'll come back to that later. You raised about the religious aspect of it. And one thing that I wanted to discuss is the way in which you raised the movement. Is actually something I feel like there has not been enough credit given to that movement. It was a massive non-violent movement that was in early 2011 that started there, and there hasn't been much mention, particularly in the Oromo political science space or political or media space, on the credit that should be given, I think, because some of the methods in the Oromo protests that we have seen, for example, the hand-crossing signs that became popular during the Oromo protests started in the Muslim movement at that time, and you paid. In the book you discuss about that in detail. I don't want to go in detail about it, but one thing that I wanted to mention is in which you admitted you didn't know about, you knew the nationalism, you grew up in the Oromo nationalism sphere, your contacts with OLF, the Oromo Liberation Front fighters, and all political activities, you knew that. But you didn't know about religious repression in the Ethiopian body politic, in the Ethiopian context. And you mentioned that as an eye-opening. Was that also a spark to the Oromo protest? Was it your way of crediting the Muslim movement and the interplay henceforth, because Oromo constitutes half of the Oromo are Muslims, right? So enlighten me a little bit there.
Yeah, because in the area I grew up, the vast majority of the population are Muslim, and while national-based repression was visible, there is this sense of security that comes from number gives you a level of security. So there was not visible. There might have been administrative discrimination and so forth, but there, at least to my young mind, I haven't seen it. I haven't experienced it. Of course, coming from multi-faith family, on my father's side and my mother's side, I grew up juggling between the two. So I was never really subjected to, observing religious-based violence, religious-based discriminations. As I discussed in the book, as I was growing up in Adama and elsewhere, I started to notice. But I just didn't have. I was so immersed in studying the national question, the ethnic issues. I didn't pay attention. When Dimsajin Sama came, there is a coincidence. why I was involved. One, it was a time when I have studied, I spent years studying nonviolent resistance, and it was a time when I was ready to plan to test it in Ethiopian case. And actually summer comes and it gave me a perfect testing opportunity
About social mobilization.
on nonviolent resistance, resistance against authoritarian regime. And the other issue, it also affects me because our community is multi-phase. Significant portion of our population is Muslim. Of course, they will be affected by what was happening between the government and the Muslim community. And I didn't want spillover to come because at that point, the objective of the regime was to radicalize the youth so that they can justify further crackdown, and that will come and it will have multifaceted impact on the Oromo movement. So I wanted to make sure it doesn't go off rail. I wanted to contribute my part in making sure it remains constitutional, it remains secular, and it remains non-violent. And luckily, that movement had some strong leaders. I was able to talk to them. I was able to provide training on nonviolent resistance and a number of the political aspect of the movement. It was a prelude to Cairo movement for a number of reasons. There have been a number of social protesters in Ethiopia, but this one was the only one that was non-violent and sustained itself for a long period of time. Protests before that, they flare up, they died down, or they flare up and they descend into violence. This one remained disciplined, Friday after Friday, Friday after Friday. Remember, and that the key to success in social movement is the staying power, the staying course. Staying course, not only continue with the action, but also remain with the discipline, and that showed other populations, particularly the Oromo youth, that before that, remember, people were saying non-violence doesn't work under this tyrannical regime. Non-violence doesn't work in Ethiopia. This one showed us, yes, it can work in Ethiopia. Another, in fact, is a number of the Keros who were involved in the summer gained very valuable experience they carried into the Kero movement. Not only Muslims, by the way, because we didn't want this one to go sectarian. A lot of Christian Oromos were used to go to the mosques on Fridays and protest with them once they had done the prayer, provide them with water when there is a tear gas. So we were sending young people to go, not only show solidarity as way of, they used to go with big cross and show that solidarity, but also gain experience. So yes, this was an important lesson.
Yeah. We have not been paying enough attention to how that impacted the movements that came afterwards. I thought the Oromo First speech, I'm jumping now to another chapter, even to me, was one of the most radical departure in terms of framing the Oromo questions. And I think I was also flowing with the established narrative that I am Oromo First when you said on Al Jazeera 2013, May 2013 or something. That really shook the foundation of the beliefs of many as to where this narrative was going. My understanding was, okay, this was really sharp and very, very radical in itself. But I came to learn now that was a transition of a narrative. That is what you mentioned here in the book. And I quote you here, as many understood it as a radical or secessionist politics, Oromo First was a transition from the narrative that was before, or from the slogan that was before, Oromia shall be free. So Oromo First is a transition of narrative from Oromia shall be free, in which Oromo First indicates that the Oromo question needs to be responded within the framework of the Ethiopian state or the Ethiopian political dispensation, as opposed to Oromia shall be free, which indicates that the demand cannot be made unless without cessation. enlighten me a little bit more here, because I'm also taken by surprise here, because I always thought that this was a radical sloganeering.
I would describe Oromo Forest assertive. There was a time when our people, I dedicate quite significant towards what I called collapse of collective self-esteem, when the Oromo consensus was so dispirited, demoralized, and this was taken as a sign of weakness, as if Oromos should feel guilty about rising against subjugation. So that's in one sense. Oromo Forest is assertiveness of no. Part of no. Basically, Oromo Forest is really a no regret. We don't regret for fighting against injustice that particularly targeted us. But it has transformative impact that I inserted into it. I didn't start with Oromo Forest. A lot of people don't know that since I started writing, and I've written tons and tons, and I've spoken a lot, people forgot actually what I used to write prior to the protest. I was known in the Oromo camp as the Ethiopianist because I assertively argued the Oromo question, the Oromo issue, the Oromo demands need to be answered within the context of Ethiopian state by reforming the Ethiopian state so that it become inclusive and democratic, that can advance the rights of Oromos and others. This is as early as 2005-6. Back in the day, we didn't have Facebook and others, but I used to appear on Pal Talks where we used to debate, email distribution network, it's a listserv. So I was known as that one,
It's a narrative that you picked up from Lencho, for example. Lencho Leta in the early 90s, when he pushed for this agenda, I think he was pushed and he resigned from the knowledge production aspect of it in terms of pushing towards this and producing more argument about it. He just retreated back because the backlash was so severe. Did you pick it up from him? Like, is it a continuation of what Lencho Leta could not further?
The intellectual element of it is from Lencho. But before that, even when I was in Ethiopia, I wasn't sure. We say Oromia shall be free, we say Bilisumma. The practicality of it was a bit fuzzy for me. Once I went to Singapore, I traveled across. I saw countries that grapple with the same problem we have, but maintain the same state and democratize. Malaysia, Singapore, and I was fortunate enough to meet their leaders, study their history. And I read Lencho, the Horn of Africa at Crossroads, while in Singapore. And then I started reading about national questions and ethnic issues. And then I studied at Stanford. Then I started formulating. I started to reach conclusion that this was the right path. I wanted, our camp from early on, the Oromo movement was, there were two ideas. Should we create an independent state or should we transform the existing state? So I came concluded on the side of early on the side of we need to no more, we cannot, seceding is possible, but not beneficial to our people. So I was advancing that, I was provoking, I was arguing, I was young and arrogant, and I used to be very blunt. Now Oromo First gave me the platform. Remember before Oromo First I went to DC and I engaged the other crowd, the Ethiopians, the Amhara crowd, and I was able to understand. I was able to sharpen how to sell our narrative. With Oromo First, what we did, because it's such assertive, it sounds radical. So it helps you utilize nationalism. I studied I see nationalism as a tool, as a resource, as a fuel for social mobilization. You cannot mobilize people if you don't have some fuel with it. So I used Oromo First, that the assertive element of it, agitate and rise up people. But within that, I moved the narrative quite successfully with other people towards the center. So before that, at every rally, we say Oromia shall be free. Right? Oromia shall be free means Oromia should be free from the Ethiopian state. On this one is Oromo First. One, it leaves door for second, third, fourth identities. Second, it also makes the issue about Oromo, not Oromia, about the people, not the state, leaving significantly shifting the mindset toward the possibility of advancing your rights, your interest within the existing state. So that's a bit of the secret. Now it's a past, so I can confess. But that was a little bit of the machination that was taking place. Of course, we purposely avoided. Before that, there was so much debate about independent Oromia or democratic Ethiopia, which is linked to unleashed. But he was pushed. He also kind of retreated to the academic world. He kind of vacated the public space. So we came and kind of filled in that space. But while doing that, we avoided the pitfall of confronting hardline nationalism by actually stealing and using the hardline nationalism symbols, so that we would not be accused as sellouts, as less patriotic.
Well, you also came from that backlash of your criticism of the ONF in 2009. That article published on Oprite, and you mentioned it somewhere in this book, failure to deliver, I believe, is the first critical inward look towards the achievements and the failures of the OLF as a vanguard party of the Oromo struggle within the Ethiopian state. And you came from that criticism, and I believe that didn't go smoothly for you publishing that. You talk about how you reached out to some of the Oromo intellectuals, and many of them agreed, but did not want to publicly support the publication of that. What was so interesting in there, you might add something in it, for me, is that you were not only criticizing the failure of the Oromo Liberation Front leadership, because they were just going through this systemic fragmentation at that time. And it was very disappointing, of course, for many, but you were also touching upon, the soft power within, the substance of the establishment and the foundational principle, if I can say that. And I can imagine that didn't go quite well among some quarters of Oromo intellectuals and political class. You came from that, and then you ended up. Was Oromo First your way of responding to that criticism and backlash you faced when you were eviscerating the OLF for its failure to deliver after 40 years?
I'm a child of OLF. Literally, my father was OLF. I grew up under OLF's control, under OLF's area. OLF was larger than life. When we were young, all we wanted to be was OLF soldier. We never thought there is any other form of struggle without OLF, without urban struggle. I grew up fantasizing about in the bush. Your hair. It reminds me of this. When I was a kid, I don't know how I remember this stuff. It's a surprise. I was probably 4 or 5. I remember. All of a sudden, this young man and woman disappeared, and a few months later, they came. What I remember was girls who are hair like you, and they have, the armaments and the AK-47s, and they walk in such a rhythm. It was like, when I just want to grow up fast and doing that. So I couldn't. But as I was growing up, I became a bit disillusioned with OLF increasingly. When I went to Singapore, I was looking and got into these discussions. So a time came where I concluded, as OLF did not fail completely. Actually, OLF succeeded beyond anybody's wildest imagination. Remember, OLF never evolved into full-fledged organization. It never evolved into full-fledged armed organization. It never had the military power current Marros OLF has, not even a fraction of it. But OLF transformed the Oromo Ethiopian state. The OLF politics, the OLF narrative was extremely powerful, but it never developed a matching organizational capacity. And after 1991, and I write significantly in the book, it got stuck. Couldn't transform itself. It got into organizational crisis and paralysis. So I studied this very carefully. It wasn't just an opinion I wrote. It's actually a research paper. I turned into opinion. On top, I say it's not a research paper because I don't want to be misused. I wanted people to see it as my opinion. But that opinion was informed by, 2 years of research where I interviewed a number of OLF leaders, EPR people, and others. But the most important part of that writing for me was it's a therapy. Finally, now I'm going to grow out of OLF. Now, finally, now I can. It's like OLF is like a big father, and you come of 18 and 20. You are used to the nice meal from your mother and your father providing. All of a sudden, you are not satisfied with what they're offering. You want to try something. You want to achieve more. To do that, you have to face your parents and say, Mom and Dad, the way you are doing things, not for me. I want to try something.
So it was like a self-liberating journey for you?
Absolutely. It was a self-liberating from the shadow of my parent, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was probably one of the most painful and finally relieving piece of writing I put together. Of course, after that, the attack and all came. By the time Oromo first come, I was vindicated. I wrote this in 2009, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody attacked me. And by 2012, OLF was split even into more factions. Mm-hmm. There was paralysis, there is disillusion, there is desperation. So when we started moving around 2012, 2011, I've already developed audience. I've already developed constituency. I've already shared the constituency from OLF. So I was able to walk shoulder to shoulder. And we remained antagonistic till probably now. But I was able to, before that, organizations like OLF, they're very, very powerful. And if you are not tactical and strategic, they can drone you any minute. So you have to be so I did a lot of groundwork before that. By that time, Oromo first came, it gave me the biggest platform. It gave me the nationalist credentials I needed. And I've already established a rapport with the community. So Oromo first was to not correct. OLF was, there are two ideas in OLF under self-determination. Now this one gave me to withstand the resistance, the inertia, and make corrections towards the narrative I wanted the Oromo movement to adopt.
I don't consider it as a bad. I think it was a very needed critic that you published at that time. Aren't the Oromo intellectuals failing in terms of evaluating and reevaluating where the Oromo struggle is, doing an inventory work of where did it come from? And there was a lot of, if not by way of self-criticism, but a lot of knowledge production in the past. Somehow it stopped now. We don't see that.
We haven't failed. We are lagging behind because we are in transition. See, what happened in 2018? Since 2018 is very different from Oromo experience. The Oromo politics prior to 2018 is a resistance politics. It is resisting the state, it's fighting in the state. The knowledge we were producing, that what we were articulating was against the state. The state was the other. The state was the enemy. The state was the outsider. Right? After 2018, this movement, after 40 years, finally was the movement achieved. I mean, the Oromo movement was an important part of the 74 change that brought land distribution. It was an important element in 1991 federalism. 2018, finally, they took the bull by the horn. It captured state power. Now, the knowledge that needed to be developed, the narrative that needed to develop is from resistance to governance ideology, governance narrative.
Yeah, but I don't believe that would happen without an inward look as we stood now, and that's what I'm
going there, and these 6 years have been extremely fast. Things were happening so fast, and it just didn't give us room to reflect. You have to go to jail like me and spend 18 months reflecting. But those of you who are outside, who are consumed by day-to-day horrible news that's coming, I don't want to be judgmental, because you didn't have the opportunity I had. I'm not excusing. I'm just trying to explain. There was an explanation because this was, one is a new era, totally new era. Second, we didn't have space. We didn't have the trauma. The trauma we went through, from the high hopes to the crushing, to the killing of Hajalu, to that was, we are lagging behind because of that problem. Do we need to reflect? Yes, we need to reflect. Where were we? That's what I tried to do last year when I was writing, which I probably made a mistake. Length what I did. Write it, puts it out, no push it, which is about
Yes.
chapters of struggle, and the next.
Translate it into English to make it available for the wider, or Amharic for that matter.
Because it was the paper was targeted into mid-level intellectuals, bureaucrats. It was really aimed at serving the current leaders to serve the importance of narrative adjustment, which they misappropriated it now with this strict stuff. We have begun. I think we will begin. We'll get to it. I mean, it's a new experience, but we have to reflect. We have to. Where are we? We have to be honest with ourselves that this is a new era. Our suffering might have worsened. In fact, it has worsened. The condition might have worsened, but the way our people look at themselves vis-a-vis the state, the way the state look at our people, has transformed itself. That has transformational impact. We produce knowledge not for our entertainment, not for our, we produce knowledge for the public. If any intellectual has to see himself as a trader, you have to produce or package the merchandise in a way that can appeal and that can help you connect with your customers. So as intellectuals, we need to look at first what the people are thinking. Is there any change in the way they see the state, relationship with the state? Then we have to come from there. What kind of knowledge, what kind of narrative would further empower these people? I think the time is now right.
Don't you think you would have been in a better position from abroad, like you were doing before, than coming post 2018? I'm saying this was only you can answer that. I have my opinion of it. Was it a mistake to come back home? Number two, after you came home, one of the largest criticisms that you faced is that you played a significant role in demobilizing the social movements that brought in the political change, from the context of which the Oromo need to evaluate the relationship to the state. Okay, that was a significant turn of events that was made possible through the social mobilization. You came home, you demobilized that. You face a lot of criticism on that. And I want you to reflect, not my way of defending, but...
In this book, I don't defend. I hope the readers will understand. I'm not trying to defend. I have nothing to defend. I'm very happy with my achievement. I'm trying to explain. I'm not defending. I'm trying to explain. Not to convince, but to people to understand me. I don't want to convince them. It's up to them to really make their own judgment. Was going back a mistake, but do I regret? I don't, because I left Ethiopia when I was 17. My understanding was probably I understood Umoga and a little bit maybe Asala and Adam. I didn't understand Ethiopia. What I know about Ethiopia, what I developed about Ethiopia, is mostly through reading and through conversing with people. So I knew Ethiopia from the far. Coming back to Finfinne, helping me to see it up close. Going to jail made me look at from inside the belly. So I understood Ethiopian state much better after prison. So that experience, could I have done something different? Of course, there is always opportunity cost. As to demobilizing Cairo, that's what we're talking. If you saw my speech at the Millennium Hall when I went, where my pain began earlier than that, it was an appeal to the youth as well as to the government to close gap. They were enemies. Remember, the people in power were killing us with the previous government.
The same people we have.
Yeah, and we decided it's not a fluke. I take primary responsibility. It was me who, from years back, I decided that our best hope is to bring Opidios to power as a transitional step. And having done that, now I came after opposing Abiy and all, then I came with decision saying we need to do whatever it takes to make sure this transition succeed. Part of that is to ensure the contradiction between the street and the state do not continue. Because if the contradiction between the street and state continue, we will descend much and more into chaos. And there is lawlessness, there is all kinds of stuff if you saw at that point. So I wanted this youth to prepare themselves, to transform themselves, their ideas from resistance mindset to governance. Not to support or not to be, sit down, but to whatever politics they advance, I want them to do it from governance perspective, not from resistance perspective. And I wanted the Oromo intelligentsia to move towards that. That's why I made that speech and I traveled across. There was no state. I mean, the government has collapsed. When we were traveling, there was nothing,
I remember having this conversation. We were debating about what role that played in your call for the youth, for the able to go home, to go to conduct politics from the town halls, not away from the streets. And there was a serious conversation happening among internally. And I think one of the arguments raised in support of that was that if it didn't happen, there is a huge risk of fragmentation. The part of the youth would associate themselves with the power, the political elite that came to power, and while you're still, part will still continue to resist, and that will create that dangerous fragmentation. We didn't save that. That didn't. It came to pass anyway, even though that scenario could have been avoided at that time. That fragmentation could not.
But we don't regret. We don't regret because we tried. The whole theme of this book is whether we succeeded or not. We tried. Regret comes from not trying. You see something is right, just because it has risk, then you don't try it. You pass and say, oh, I should have done that. In afaan Oromo there is a proverb, also is, it's like, what if? Right? So I don't, in my life, if I see something I need to do it, I will do it so that I don't want to, after I passed, I should have picked up that. I don't want to do that. So for my theoretical training, and this transition is something I studied and thought about it for years and years. And kind of pacifying the Cairo was something I planned. It didn't just come. I envisioned of a transition where the change makers and where the reformers from the state come together, form a block. There is this thing that they criticized me when saying Jawar said two government. I said no. What I'm saying is there is two powers at that point. There is a state power that was weaker. Abiy controlled it, but it's very weak. But there is street power at that point. If you combine the force of these two, you will have a jet with two engines. If you don't combine and let them go on a contradictory direction, they are going to clash again, and they are going to destroy the very thing they worked hard, they sacrificed for. So that was my thinking, no regrets again, because we tried. Imagine if I didn't try that and continued. Some of the funny stuff is, I continued protesting probably until June against Abiy from early on. So the very people who pleaded with me, who accused me, that saying I'm addicted to protest, I'm addicted to the fighting, I'm jealous. It was those people who are now saying, well, because if I continued with that, early on the reason I continued was I knew what Abiy wanted to do. Unlike most people, I had a clear, what's happening now, what he has done so far is very clear to me. What? But I couldn't explain that to people. People couldn't understand because they didn't have the information I had at that point, So trying my best to support the transition through critical support was the best I could have done. But later on, the force of history, who would have imagined?